Welcome to Trailer. Holy shit! I might just keep that in. I usually have a big sip of water, and I did the whiskey, and here we go. Okay, it's all downhill. Well, maybe it's uphill from here. Welcome to Trailer Geeks and Teaser Gods. I'm your host, Corey Nathan. This is where we get to have some whiskey and speak with the brilliant and creative people who make the greatest coming attractions, movie posters, and digital campaigns of all time. This program is brought to you by our friends at the Golden Trailer Awards and Epicenter Music. It's brought to you by Brent Allen Hagel. You know him as Trailer VO Brent or something like that. And by Make It Universal and Rotten Tomatoes presents Scene on the Screen. And our newest partner, Soundstripe. You'll be hearing their music in the intros and the outros and everywhere in between. And I'm grateful to the folks who helped bring this to you, and I'm grateful to you, our listeners. It really is a privilege to get to share these conversations with you. And today, I am so thrilled to be joined by the owner and CEO of RAVE Collective, Brett Winn, and his partner and head of creative advertising, Ben Andron. Brett, Ben.
Hey,
Hello,
what's happening?
hello.
Nice to see you. It's really
Good to see you.
The
Yeah,
only
good to
way
be
this
here.
could be better is if it was in person, but I'm doing everything over Zoom because we're going to share the video out with the world someday soon in
Love it.
theaters near you. Yeah. But so Brett, we were just talking about this before we hit record, but Brett was on the show before, but it's actually
2019.
2019. It was the very end of 2019. Not
Yep.
much has happened since then.
If only we knew.
If only we knew. Would you want to do it again? Like, you start endeavors. This is way off topic because I want to get to your backgrounds, but there are a number of businesses I've started and any number of endeavors I've gone into. And then like you're 3 years in, 5 years in, 10 years in, and you're like, man, if I knew what the hell I was getting into, I never would have gotten into this. Do you ever think that about any of the things that you're doing now?
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, I think with the beginning with Refinery AV, I felt that way for like the first 5 years. I was like, did I do the right thing? I came out of the studio. I'm doing this. This is crazy. I remember we had margaritas every single Friday because I was like, we made it another week.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
know.
for sure. Yeah, I'm sure Lisa, my wife, is saying that to this day. Like, I should have rethunk this from the get-go. So we'll get to you, Brett, and your background because I want to reset that a little bit, and a lot has happened over the last 5+ years. But Ben, since this is your inaugural visit on Trailer Geeks, why don't we start with you? And
Yes.
I feel like your story should begin something like this. I'm Eugene Morris Jerome from Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, New York. And you can tell I've never been away from home before.
Oh, because I'm Jewish. I get it.
No.
Yeah, it's like
No, because you're like today's the 21st century Neil Simon. That's what I was thinking.
yeah. Thank you.
Playwright, Jew, it's all the same. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Jewish playwright. You've never heard one of those before.
No. So you went to, did you grow up in Florida or you just went to Miami or?
I was born in New York and then spent 5 years in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, en route to Miami. And then from the time that I was 10 years old until I moved out here, I was in Miami. Yeah, so like my growing up years were really in Miami.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Winston-Salem, North Carolina thing was weird. Yes, it was.
I was going to say, like you were the.
Yeah.
What I
Yeah,
meant
Like
was-
you got off at the wrong stop, or what happened?
that's actually true. We actually were the only Jews in our little town. Yeah, my dad was doing a work thing there that lasted for about 6 months, but then we were just there, so we stayed. It was kind of, I mean, it was nice, like going from Upper West Side Manhattan to living on a dead end cul-de-sac with a forest of your backyard, and it was a cool thing to see seasons for a little bit before Miami and LA.
So you just reminded me, I have this audio recording of Thanksgiving at the Nathan House in New Jersey, which Brett and I share that in common.
That's right.
1993, the house that I grew up in. And it's right after I met Lisa, my wife. It was literally like just weeks after we went on our first date. And you hear me saying, Zeta, I call my grandfather Zeta. Zeta, I met this really, really nice girl in Alabama. First question he asks, you know what it is?
Is she Jewish?
Is she
Yeah.
Jewish? That's exactly what he says. And then my mother pipes up, yeah, Sal, he met the Jew in Alabama. Anyway, all right, so Winston-Salem. And then how old were you when you got to Miami?
10. Once I was getting ready to go into like like pre-middle school, my parents felt that it was maybe Winston-Salem wasn't the best place to raise a Jewish kid. So we went
Yeah.
to Miami, and that was it.
And then you went to undergrad there. Did you study writing or what did you?
I went to University of Miami and studied motion pictures and English.
Oh, okay. So you knew you wanted to get into film from the get-go, but
Yeah,
specifically writing
yeah.
was
I
a
thought that I was
passion.
going to be a writer for sure. I came out to LA to really pursue writing. And, I think that in film school, they kind of give you the impression that there's going to be movie contracts handed out at the state lines. And I think, like so many of us, you discover, wait, that's not how it works. So I ended up getting a job. The funny thing, my wife was a teacher. So we at least had some sort of income when we first moved out here. And she was teaching Neil Spector's kids
Oh,
at Sinai
okay.
Akiva.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so at some point, she was helping the family through something, and he said, "Oh, what does your husband do?" He's like, "Well, he wants to get into the movie business, but he's not working right now." He's like, "Have him call me." And like a few
W-
months later, I got my first job at Creative Domain, working for Neil Spector.
was Neil already really well? Because he was arguably the king of home entertainment. Um,
Yeah,
was he already well
yeah.
established in that niche?
He was, yeah. I mean, my role was to be the assistant in the theatrical department, which
Hmm.
was, from 4 years later when Creative Domain merged with Trailer Park, it was Creative Domain really had very strong home entertainment, video games, DVD, that's what it was. Creative content was back then was
Yeah.
DVD extras and menus and stuff like that. Not as strong theatrically. So even though I started there in theatrical, I immediately kind of just started helping out with everything else they had. And
Mm.
so became like their sort of one of their main copywriters, and I started to produce and worked with some of the home entertainment folks. Jeremy Keeler was there at the time, and
Oh,
I
right.
learned a
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
from him.
yeah.
It was a great thing because I was able to get a lot of experience doing a lot of different things. For several years, I was producing DVD content, which was awesome. I got to interview Patrick Swayze. It was just like fun stuff that was going on. And then really wanted to get back into theatrical, and that's when um, I left there and went to Ant Farm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if I remember
With a
correctly, yeah, yeah, you
Yeah.
you you literally had an office between Mike and Barbara. Do I remember that right?
You do, yeah, yeah. I guess nobody wanted that office, and then I got there. It's like, here you go. It's an empty office right between Mike and Barbara.
So
Yeah,
And
wait,
then they
hang on a
left, and it
second. Did
was,
you did you go to Ant Farm after the merger with Trailer Park?
yeah, I was there during the
Hmm.
merger. And then I thought, oh, that would be great because I can get into theatrical. And they were like, no, 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 no. The creative domain people are going to keep doing that, and the trailer park people are going to do that. So it looked like it was about time for me to go.
So we
Um,
worked at the same company and didn't even know it
that's
at the
right.
same
Yeah, for
time.
sure. Uh-huh. Definitely.
Yeah.
Brett, how long
Yep.
was it? How long were you there? Because I know Brad and Adam left shortly after the merger because they were really kind of creating silos. That I don't think I'm
Well,
speaking anything out of
yeah, no,
school.
no, they left when Trailer Park also bought
Hmm.
Art Machine,
Yeah, Art
and
Machine,
that
and then
was
they,
kind of a weird thing because you had two print departments at that time, so that was
yeah.
kind of why they departed. But I started Trailer Park in 2002, so I'd been there for like
That's
4 years when the merger happened, when they were acquired, and then the merger happened.
Wait, did
that's
you
when I started
come?
at Creative Domain at 2002.
And so did you come back to? Wait, so your time at Disney was between Trailer
After
Park and Refinery?
Refinery,
Okay,
yes,
all right.
yeah, yeah.
So, Ben, after that merger, you were going to be kept on the creative domain side, the home entertainment side. So you decided to pursue theatrical. Man, what a
Yeah.
great place! Because Rod and I think Amanda was still there, and
Yep, for sure.
in addition to Mike and Barbara, and Andy, some great
Yeah.
producers. Like, what a great collection of producers. Was there anyone in particular, producer wise, writer wise, that you really gravitated to and learned a lot from?
Well, I didn't learn anything from Greg Ostrin. He's just an idiot. Um, no, I'm kidding. I love Greg.
Yeah.
I spent most of my time was working with Rod when I got there because I didn't know this at the time, but my hiring was sort of part of the plan of Mike and Barbara's departure.
Right.
It wasn't personal. It wasn't like, oh, now that Ben's here, we're out. That's not that's not. But apparently, I guess what it was that Rod and Andy and Amanda were running jobs and also starting to try to take over running the business from Mike and Barbara. And so they really needed like myself, Brad Goldberg, Jared Wheelock, we were the kind of we had to be running the job so that those guys could focus on running the business. And so my coming in was sort of, I only overlapped with Mike and Barbara for probably less than 6 months.
Oh,
And once we all got onto our, like once I got up and running, um, Rod felt more comfortable being able to take a step back and leave things to me, which is actually how I met Brett on sitting on a fiber for a
oh,
project that Rod had brought in that was at Disney. So Brett was the client. And some great. Um,
Wait, I didn't even remember that. Was
yeah,
that
I think it
National
was
Treasure?
National Treasure too. That's
National
right.
Treasure
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
Wow.
so
Wow.
I know you joked about Greg Ostrom, but you and Greg have something in common. You both are very accomplished writers. But Greg has always, since I've known him for many years, going back to his Harley's House days, he has had this great discipline of going home at night and every night for at least a couple hours just writing.
yep,
And now he's had a number of screenplays that were optioned and plays that
yeah,
have been produced, very much like you.
yeah. He
Is
just had a
that
play produced. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off your question, but he just had a play produced off Broadway that's Broadway bound now. So it's really
yeah?
exciting for him.
Oh wow, so that one's going to the big one of the big houses.
Maybe we shouldn't say that, but
Yeah.
yeah, it is.
A
Like,
Kanahara? Are we putting a Kanahara
yeah,
on it?
yeah,
Okay,
exactly. It's foo,
no, no,
as
no.
they
So,
say. Yeah,
that's the one. It's a really great concept. It's the story about Marlon Brando going up to Connecticut and
yep,
auditioning for Tennessee Williams.
yeah, exactly. It's Kowalski.
Kowalski, yeah, what a
Well, the
great
funny thing
concept.
is that so Greg, here's the funny thing. So Greg was writing screenplays, and I came out here to try to write screenplays, and it never really worked for me. And a buddy of mine in New York who was like this, up and coming, trying to produce and work in the theater business, he called me and said, "Have you ever thought about writing a play?" And I said, "No, I haven't." He says, "Well, there's a shortage of comedy on Broadway right now. If you can write a comedy with seven actors or fewer and three sets or fewer, because those are so how you keep the budget down, I'll produce it." So I thought, well, I'll give it a try. So I wrote a play and he produced it off Broadway. It was crazy. And that whole thing was happening while I was at Ant Farm. So Greg Ostrin, meanwhile, he had been writing a lot of screenplays and just like me, had also never thought to write theater because we live in LA. Who's writing theater in LA? So I know there are people, but not who work in movie marketing in LA. Those people are not writing plays. And when he saw like, oh, you just wrote a play and it just got made off Broadway, maybe I should write a play. And that's when he started writing Kowalski and coming up with some of these ideas that he had to write screenplays, and he started writing them as plays. And now he's had, I don't even know how many, but he has a ton of plays that he's had produced. So
Sure,
it's
yeah,
really great for him. And yeah,
yeah.
we talked about a month ago. He's doing great and really happy for him.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I bring it up because it is important. A lot of folks have other interests. You both have other interests. I mean, you're like a black belt in Kung Fu. You have 114 children, you
That
approximately.
he
Oh,
knows of. That he
yeah.
This
knows
is
of.
yeah.
And Brett, you're like president of EO Los Angeles and
Yeah.
musician, rock star with I think the same amount of cars that Ben has children.
Almost. Almost.
Almost. But
You
no, no,
might have
no.
me beat on that one.
I, but I bring it up because a lot of folks, it's not. Listen, to be great at this thing, you really have to be focused. But at the same time, I think having these other interests, these other pursuits, actually makes you better in a way if you're able to balance it. Trailer Geeks and Teaser Gods is brought to you by Soundstripe. So if you're an editor, a producer, a creative exec, a music supervisor, or even a podcaster like me, if you're a content creator of all stripes, if you will, and you're looking for the perfect library of music and sound effects, check out Soundstripe. With over 10,000 high quality tracks, including music from Grammy winning artists, Soundstripe makes music licensing hassle free. Believe me, I've tried it. I've been on there, I've navigated around. It was really terrific. It was really easy to use. So, with a simple subscription, you get unlimited access to a vast catalog, downloadable stems for creative flexibility, and AI song editing to customize tracks effortlessly. Plus, their seamless integration with Premiere, which is what most of my editor friends are on, it means a smoother editing experience. If you're ready to level up your production game with properly licensed, high quality music and sound effects, head over to soundstripe.com/trailergeeks and save 10% with code trailergeeks. That's soundstripe.com/trailergeeks and code trailergeeks. So I guess my question is, how do you balance it? You're an accomplished writer, but you're also at the top of your game, in the major league trailer industry. How have you been able to balance it? Or have there been times when you kind of fumbled the ball and weren't able to balance things too well?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that you are right. When everything is balanced and working perfectly, it just doing a lot of things makes you better at everything that you're doing. It's just it like the rising tide raises all ships, as they say. And it's like if I can kind of get up in the morning and go run 6 miles, you think, well, you just spent an hour doing that you're not doing on work. It's like, no, but I'm now more focused at work because I just did that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that writing can help, like, especially with what we do, which is so creative, but at the same time, a lot of the creative is out of our control. When you're sort of putting your heart and soul into a cut, and then it's like, oh, just swap out that music and change that thing. It's like, but that's what made it so awesome. It's like
Yeah.
you have to kind of swallow your pride a little bit and be creative the way you're being told to be creative. So having a different creative outlet that can just be you and whatever you're doing, I think really, really helps.
And you've also had good mentors as well as good partners, good collaborators in the past. And now, obviously, with Brett, I'm sure that had a lot to do with your decision making and going about this endeavor together. But I would imagine that there have been times when things did get a little bit out of balance, whether it was just the demands of a big family, or other creative pursuits. How important is it having good friends who really care about you to say, "Hey, dude, what can we do to get things back in balance?"
I think that's important, of course. I think that having done this for so long, I feel it for myself. Like I know enough about what I do to understand that, like, hey, right now, this needs your full attention. You can't afford to be writing something at this moment. You can't, so a lot of times that I've been kind of on a deadline for something, like my working out has taken a toll. As you pointed out, yes, I've done kung fu and I've taught martial arts for years. And about 10 years ago, I just had to, that was too much. And I knew it for myself. Like I need to know where the boundaries are. And most of the time I can feel it for myself. Sometimes I don't. And yeah, it's really important to see that. And most of the time I get it from my wife. Most of the time
Mm.
she's like, why are you spending time on that? Why aren't you doing that other thing? And it's like, why haven't you worked out? Why aren't you getting up and going running? Like, she kind of keeps me very, very honest.
Oh, that's great. Having a good partner, at home and in the shop, being discerning in terms and being open. I know one of the virtues that you focused on with Rave, I think it's humility. Is that right? Did I remember that right? Yeah. So having the humility to be open to loving candor when someone is that way with you. Now, I don't. There's a lot more story to tell here, Ben, and we'll finish that. But I want to make sure that we refresh folks on Brett's story. So first of all, Brett, nothing good ever came out of Jersey, dude. So what the
Dude,
fuck?
Bon Jovi, Bruce Springsteen, come on now.
Blues Traveler, come
Blues
on.
Traveler.
Yeah, absolutely. Frank Sinatra before them.
Frank Sinatra, yeah.
So how'd you
The
get from
Sopranos, lots of things came out of New
Lots
Jersey.
of
It's all
things.
good.
Yeah, lots of good things. So how'd you get from Cherry Hill to to Ithaca, indie
That's right.
filmmaking, this fledgling little network that nobody's ever heard of called FX?
They hadn't heard of it at that
At that
point.
point, they hadn't. It was,
No. It was so funny when I joined FX, I didn't even know what it was. And they're like, "Oh, from what I understood, they were going to take all of the programming like old reruns from Fox's Vault and rerun them. So like Green Hornet and Batman, and then the only programming they really had that was original was this thing called Breakfast Time, which was in a studio in New York where they like interviewed people and they had different rooms of an apartment and they called it like this breakfast show. Um, but that was it when I joined. I mean, when I joined FX, there's like 11 people in all of FX, like soup to nuts, top to bottom. I think
wow.
Elio Hensley was like the head of creative marketing at the time. And there are like 3 or 4 executives above her, maybe, and then maybe 6 people in our department, and that was it.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, it was crazy.
So, but you came out here like a lot of folks. I'm sure you were thinking about making film, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny. I think probably, I don't know. I know you were an actor, right, Corey? You in your early days, you were acting, right?
Yeah, I studied theater in New York, but I
Yeah.
was producing. Like even when I was in the conservatory, I was already producing these little, I mean, I say 99 seat equity waiver, but like we were lucky if we got 50 seats in the house, It was so I started it, we were scrappy. But yeah, I love that stuff, man. Doing Shakespeare in Chelsea, or a new translation of Chekhov, on 7th and 23rd, like just these little second story or basement theaters that we found. It was great. It was awesome. Yeah.
That was the whole reason I went to Ithaca. I went to Ithaca for film school because I was like, well, I don't know what my chances are as an actor, but if I learn to make films, I can put myself in anything I do and no one can tell me no. So that was the
Right.
only reason.
I thought the exact same thing. That's
Yeah.
I was an actor before going to college and thought like, once I realized, oh no, indie film, I'll just write something. I'll be Ed Burns or whatever, or
Makes sense, right?
yeah, for
You know
sure.
what's funny is I produced there was a production of Three Sisters that I produced, and I had this brilliant director. I won't say who she is, but folks would recognize her now. But she was brilliant, and she was sensitive, and she was also diplomatic. So when we put the show together, I was like, so I would love to have a part. And she's like, well, I don't know. I'm like, I'm producing the fucking thing. Like, like, can I have like a little bit part, like a walk on or something? Yeah, I don't know. So it's funny. Like sometimes it comes, and then you have to like defer. You hire the director, you got to defer. So anyway, that's life, I guess.
So crazy. So crazy. But yeah, so I moved out to kind of make films. And I got an internship, or actually, my roommate got an internship with Evolution, who at the time was, gosh, what are they producing? They're producing some reality shows, but they're also doing these live promos, like special shoots and stuff for FX. And like, oh, if you want to get in on air promos, I can kind of get you in the door. And I was like, great. What's an on air promo?
Right. Right. That's
I
funny,
mean,
man. That's so, but I'm sure you got in the room and like you figured it out pretty quick.
I did, but I went on like 4 interviews to get a
Oh,
production assistant job at FX Networks.
there weren't
And
even
that
4 people at FX. Like, who were you
I know.
interviewing with?
And so the funny thing is, it was a woman named Pam Cohen and Noah Edelson who were running their creative advertiser. So the funny thing is, me not knowing any better, after 4 interviews, I called her on a Saturday and I said, hey, listen, I really, really want to work for you. Why don't I come in next week? I'll work the whole week for free. And if you don't like me, you don't have to pay me.
Oh,
And she was like, okay, why don't you come in on Monday? And by the way, don't call me at home on a Saturday ever again.
that's awesome. That's
And
awesome.
I went in on Monday and she's like, look, we have to pay you. I can't not pay you. But how about, a couple $100 for the week and we'll see where it goes on Friday. And then I kind of got my foot in the door. But it's that kind of tenacity, and just fearlessness, I guess, that has gotten me leaps and bounds in my career. And every time I forget that, I make that big leap again and something big happens.
You
So
got moxie,
you
kid.
got moxie.
But it's true. Like I think betting on yourself, and listen, sometimes it doesn't work out. Like sometimes you take a big swing and you just, you fall flat on your face, but sometimes it works out. You get that shot, you get a correction, but also you get the shot ultimately. So that's really cool. At what point were you were you working at FX when you did My Date with Drew? What?
No, I was at Trailer Park by that
Oh,
point.
okay.
Yeah, I was at Trailer Park, and a buddy of mine, Brian Herzlinger, who I'd known since we were little kids, and he had a job working for Bill D'Elia, who was an executive producer. He did Chicago Hope, he did Ally McBeal. And when Ally McBeal wrapped, my buddy was like an assistant to the executive producer, and then Ally McBeal wrapped, and he wasn't doing anything, and my buddy couldn't get work and was ready to move back to New Jersey.
Yeah, yeah.
And we sat down for lunch one day at a Hamburger Hamlet. And he's like, I'm moving back to Jersey. I can't do this anymore. And we came out to make movies and we're not making movies. And I was like, well, let's just make a movie then. He's like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. And I was like, well, what if we made a documentary? I've got an Final Cut Pro at home. We'll cut it. We'll just shoot something. And he's like, well, like what? And I said, well, not this, but you've wanted to go on a date with Drew Barrymore since you were a little kid. Why don't we try and get you a date with Drew Barrymore and we'll shoot it? But not that, but something crazy like that. And then that turned into the film. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you're able to, again, like being able to pursue this other thing while you're working full time. I think a lot of us have these passion projects that we pursue.
Well, I had a full circle moment lately.
Yeah.
recently where I was at home and my son and I were here and we are trying to figure out something to watch and he loves Adam Sandler and so we watched 50 First Dates,
Oh,
which during the filming of My Date with Drew I was working on a trailer for 50 First Dates.
oh,
And
that's
so it
funny.
was like this crazy comeuppance, where like I didn't even have kids when we were shooting that movie.
Yeah. One of the coolest things about doing this program is I get to collaborate with friends of mine, not just friends, but friends who are the best at what they do, like my pal Brent Allen Hagel, Trailer VO Brent. Brent, how you doing, man?
Wonderful, Corey. And I think, critics and audiences would agree to that.
So, do Trailer VO guys always talk that way, or do you ever break character?
Would never break character. Cocktail parties, they say, hey, can you do the voice thing for us while they all drink a beer?
Do you do the voice thing while you're drinking a beer?
I've never tried. I could probably win an award for that.
Oh, see, you're already breaking character, man. If we go on too long, you're going to start sounding like Gilbert Gottfried or something.
It'll be like this. Hey, yeah, it was the podcast that did it to me. Haven.
All right. All right. So before we hit it, we get back to the show. How can folks find you?
BrentAllenHagel.com, Brent, Allen, Hagel, Hagel.com on the interwebs and social media at Trailer VO Brent on social media.
It's a great follow. Thanks, Brent, and thanks for helping out. And now back to our show. Another thing I'm curious about both of you is at a certain point, you kind of, it wasn't like overnight you became a leader, business leader, creative leader. It was something that you both kind of grew into. I know for you, Ben, I'm guessing that when you made that move to Aspect, that was really, it was kind of a calling. It was Trugman was still there when you got there, right?
He was still there. And that was actually part of the reason that I went was because I guess I had been working on something. It was a project for Disney at the time at Ant Farm. And right then, all those like Michael Andolina and all them had left to go start Transit. And sometimes they'll send, especially at the end of the campaign, they'll send emails and they'll just include all the vendors that are working on it because it's like it saves time. We all know each other,
Yeah.
but these are the two shops that are doing the whole TV campaign. Just send an email to all of them. And I noticed that after they left it to go start Transit, Trugman, and it wasn't Ando on the emails anymore, it was Trugman. And I just thought to myself, like, man, he can't be happy about that. Like he sort of had I mean, he was looking to retire, and then all of a sudden he's like back in the trenches getting late night emails from Jeff Sheckman. It's
Yeah.
so that's when I reached out to him because I had been looking for, I had just sort of felt like, at that time, when you thought of Ant Farm, you thought of Rod and Andy and Michelle Giacchino. And if you knew what was going on behind the scenes, maybe you knew who I was, but if you didn't, then you don't know who I am. And I just thought I needed to make a move to sort of, you know, plant my flag or bet on myself, as you said, So that's when I thought, that's the perfect spot for me is to go there. And because everybody was saying like, oh wow, who's even at Aspect anymore? Who's going to go to Aspect? Who's going to go to Aspect? And then I went there, and I'll say in February of 2011 when I made the move. Not very many people knew who I was. A year later, everybody knew who I was. So it was like
Mm.
that worked out. And then the leadership thing did kind of happen all at once because as Trugman was looking to retire, and he had talked to myself and Lisa Feldman and Dave LaGorner, who was there at the time, about the three of us kind of taking it over. And we were doing that sort of, but he was still there. When Dave left, and it was really like, okay, this is it, like sink or swim time. Either Trugman comes back in, or we say, no, it's cool, Mark, we got this. And then suddenly we're running the company, and that's kind of how it happened.
Mm. Now, for you, Brett, if I remember correctly, you went from Studio City to Trailer Park, and I don't know if it was something where you embraced it as a leadership opportunity, but it was enterprising, it was entrepreneurial because you were really starting their Trailer Park's first broadcast division, right? Or was it? Did it
Broadcast.
have to do
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
opportunity to grow as a leader?
What's funny is I'd worked at Studio City and I pitched on a bunch of campaigns and we ended up winning. And at some point I thought, oh, I should be a creative director because I brought these jobs in and we won the campaign and then all of a sudden I was kind of being put in charge of them. And at the time, Stu was like, yeah, I don't do creative directors. That's not a thing here. That's not what we do. And I was like, oh, okay. And then Ron Cohen, who used to work at Studio City, had made a deal with Tim and Benny to go over to start a broadcast division and came to Kerry Sachs and I and said, "Hey, do you guys want to go with me?" And it just happened right at the right time. I was like, I kind of secretly want to cut trailers, but yes, I'll go start a broadcast division with you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and at the time, I didn't realize, like Ben and I were talking about this earlier, there's a little bit of that imposter syndrome where you just don't realize what you're doing. You're kind of like, sure, okay. And I came over and it all circles back around. So I reached out and connected with Eric Allen, who I knew from FX days. And
Yeah.
Eric Allen at the time was working at Nickelodeon. And Nickelodeon was my first client that I brought in to broadcast at Trailer Park. And it's funny how these things you don't even think about. You're just like, oh, I know somebody and I'll make a call. And then it happens and you get the job in and then you do the job and it leads to more work. And so, um, but at the time I didn't realize like, oh, I'm a leader of broadcast at Trailer Park. I kind of looked as like, well, it's just a way to get my foot in the door. If that's what you need me to do, that's what I'll do, you know.
Yeah.
But it was an array into being a leader. I just didn't know it at the time. And then I got an opportunity to cut trailers, and that kind of trumped the broadcast work I was doing because we had success. And so Tim was like, "Hey, okay, enough of that. I don't want you to do broadcast. I want you to do trailers," which is what I had wanted to do anyway. And I know it really upset Ron and Carrie at the time. And at the time, I was like, "Why? You guys got this. You know more than I do." And I think in their eyes, are like, "Yeah, but you're the one bringing in the work." But it's weird how you don't see it in the moment that you're in it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I have a question. I wanted to just a follow-up question about leadership. But a lot of folks are given the title, they're given the job, and now they see however many people are reporting to them. And I remember too, like as a producer, I was pretty good as a producer or a boss, if you want to think of it that way. When I thought of myself, oh, I'm the boss of 15 people or 100 people. But then I realized I started becoming better at it when I realized I wasn't the boss of 100 people. I had 100 bosses. Um,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
curious if there's someone that you worked with that taught you some key virtues of being a good leader, who that was, and what some of the things were that you learned.
Is that to me or to Ben? Is that to me? I,
Both
I
of
can
you. I
think.
want to hear from both of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you know what's interesting? I mean, I remember when I started at Studio City, I thought this is the best company ever. Like I started in at the end of November, and I'll never forget, like in December, he said, okay, do you have are you dating someone or whatever? I'm like, yeah, my girlfriend Pam. And he said, all right, bring Pam. We're going to do a Christmas kidnapping. And I was like, what? He goes, I'm not telling you what it is. Just show up in the parking lot at 7 a.m. on Saturday. And I remember showing up and the entire company, which was maybe, I don't know, 18, 20 people at the time, showed up. We all got on a bus and he took the entire company down to Mexico and or San Diego first and then Mexico. But like he gave us all $500 in spending cash, and you could go to Mexico, you could go to San Diego. He had the bus kind of touring around. We came back, we went to a fancy steakhouse on the water, and I was like, this is incredible. Like I can't believe that this guy's doing this. Um, and it was just as a leader, like you need culture. You need to provide an environment where people want to work hard for you. And I was just like, that was like the greatest thing I ever saw. And not because he was so giving or because it was fun, but just because as you're trying to lead a group of people, you really have to remember, like, you have to make it fun for them.
So speaking of fun, that you'll
Yeah.
appreciate this. I worked with Stu for a little bit way back in the day, and one of the people that that we recruited for him, you'll really appreciate this, was Gabe.
Ah,
But
who
what
gave now works for us, right? Yeah.
that does, yeah.
Okay.
So what
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember the most about that was Stu's close. Like he has ways of closing the deal. His
Yeah.
close of Gabe was I forget if we were on the phone together or if he left a voicemail for me to forward to Gabe, but it was a song. He was G is for how good you are and he made this whole song around the love song, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It was great. And then Gabe ended up working over there. Now he's working with you. He's
That was working with me. Although I will say that was also Stu. The interview with Stu. I came from Fox, where I had like busted my butt doing movie of the week packages all summer, and then when I asked to become a writer producer, John Luma at the time basically told me I should look for another job. And
Holy
I was like crushed. I was like, I just spent all summer doing this, and I realized that was the best gift he could have ever given me because that launched my career forward. But I remember going to Stu Weiss and having the interview and showing him a reel full of Fox promos.
Yeah.
And he did the total Hollywood thing. He goes, "All right." And he wrote a number on a piece of paper and he slid it across the table to me.
That's so
And I
stupid.
flipped it over and I looked at it and I put it back down. And he said, "So?" And I said, "That's really generous. Thank you so much. Let me think about it. Can I get back to you tomorrow?" And I got in my car and I was driving home down Ventura Boulevard and I stopped at a payphone because this was, God, what was this? This was like 1998, 99, 99. And I stopped at a payphone and I called Pam and I said, "Hey, remember that 3-bedroom condo we were looking at we couldn't afford?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Tell them we'll take it because I just doubled my salary."
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. That's great. Ben, what about for you? Leaders that influenced you, that you learned from, or different things that you learned about leadership?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many people that, yeah, I think you mentioned before, I had the office between Mike and Barbara. And so just proximity alone. Of course, the really important things had doors closed, but,
Yeah.
I had my cup up against the wall. I could hear what was going on. No, but like being between the two of them, then being between Melissa and Rod, I learned a tremendous amount from them and Andy and all that at Ant Farm. And then going to Aspect, and Trugman had just such a way about him of like, kind of no bullshit and like not kind of putting in it, just telling you how it was and in the most human way possible. Um, I think those things, and then, this is maybe less leadership, but, like, as you know, sometimes people don't feel comfortable going to their boss, but there's always somebody they can talk to. And I feel like I was sort of in that role at Ant Farm. And the number of times that I would go to Melissa and say, "Hey, you might want to look at so and so because they're getting to the end of their contract and or they're at the end of their anniversary date, whatever it is, and they're looking for something," and like helping to kind of like behind the scenes maneuver things, and not in an intentional way, just trying to help and seeing the response both from leadership and from the employees. And then when I was suddenly put in a position of leadership, and I, like you said, Brett, the imposter syndrome kicked in. I didn't feel like I was the leader. I just felt like, okay, I'm just the guy who's here. And like, like, yeah, this little area where there's a copy machine, like, what if we got rid of the copy machine, just turn this into a bar? That might be fun. Let's do that. And so we did that. And all of a sudden people are happy and excited. And I just really kind of like I guess what it is like the positive examples that I have had from people like, um, Rod and Melissa and Andy and Amanda before that, and Trugman, and then sort of the positive reinforcement that I got from when I was sort of acting in that role, um, really taught me like, oh, okay, this is how you can lead a creative agency. Because like, I mean, this is one of the things. Like every time that Brett and I talk about the business, we find out how much more and more aligned we are. Like to me, and I've said this a million times, and anybody who's worked with me knows this, it's got to be fun. Like we are doing something cool. Happy people are creative people. You can't do this job if you're not having fun. And so really kind of like looking at all of our teams and our colleagues and our employees and making sure that they're having a good time when they're at work. They're enjoying coming into work in the morning. Um, I think that that's really the most important thing I've learned about leadership from all of those people.
Yeah. I am so excited to share with you that Trailer Geeks and Teaser Gods is now brought to you by the Golden Trailer Awards. Having just celebrated a wonderful GTA 24, there are many exciting developments we'll be able to share over the next year, including a documentary about the trailer industry that Monica Brady and Evelyn Brady Waters are producing. They shared a little bit more about that when they came on the show a couple weeks ago. They're producing it, and there's plenty of other news about the World Trailer Awards and much more. I'm just thrilled to be collaborating with such wonderful people like Monica and Evie, and I'm grateful for their support in bringing this program to you. Just make sure to stay plugged in at goldentrailer.com for all these exciting developments. That's goldentrailer.com. And now, on to our show. So you kind of gave me the segue that I was looking for, actually, because I was curious before you entered into this endeavor together, RAVE Collective, how aware of each other's work were you, or just each other personally, before diving into it together?
we've known each other a long time because, like I said, like originally I met Brett when I was a producer at Ant Farm and he was a client, and we I don't remember how long of a period of time that was, but then after that, when suddenly I was you know running Aspect and he was an owner at Refinery, and we would see each other at events and go to lunch and all of that, like we've kind of known each other as like friendly competitors for quite some time, I think.
Yep. Yep. Well, and it was funny. I was telling this story the other day, but Corey, it was actually you who introduced me to Ben. I mean, it was early days of Refinery AV. I feel like first year. And I feel like that's when Ben was ready to make a move. And ultimately you went to Bond. But at that point, Corey was like, hey, I think you and Ben need to get together.
Can I send you a belated fee for No,
I'll send you a bottle of scotch. It's all good.
no. I mean, it makes sense because I've known both of you guys for a long time, and you share a lot of the same values, and I knew that when you met that you would get along really well together. But now I'm curious. I mean, obviously, recent conversations over the last year have led to something really new and exciting. What what was it about each other's work or your approach to the work or your personal or business philosophies that ultimately led you to your deciding to take this leap together?
When Ben was leaving Bond, I found out pretty early, and I said I called him. I said, "Hey, let's grab lunch. I'd love to take you to lunch." And so we went to lunch and we started talking. And quite honestly, I had watched Ben's career and being such an amazing leader and doing incredible work. And when he was leaving Bond, my thought was, you need to do this on your own, dude. You need to start your own shop. Like, stop doing it for other people. You need to figure this out. And that was honestly my intention of meeting with Ben. And part of that comes with um, being in an entrepreneurial group and leading other entrepreneurs is that we all want to help each other. Like everybody wants everybody else to be successful. And when you see a spark in someone and you see their full potential, you kind of want to pull them in and be like, I see your potential. You need to do this. And what was so strange is when we sat down and had lunch, the more I started saying, you should do this on your own. And Ben was like, well, maybe, but what if we did something together? And then we started talking about our philosophies about the business and how we ran our shops and what we wanted the shops to run like. And the more we started talking, the more we realized, wow, these are like exactly the same thoughts. Like we're finishing each other's sentences before it even comes out. And this magic thing happened, and they were like, maybe we should grab dinner and talk about this a little more seriously. Um, and then we had a really long dinner, and that's when it was really like, oh shit, we got to do this, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was, I mean, honestly, that was only, I want to say, what was that, like a week and a half, 2 weeks after I had left Bond? It was still pretty new. And it was like, this is like everything. Logically, I was just saying, like, okay, don't get excited about anything right now. Just take some time and, process and all that. But like, I mean, I came away from that dinner and I think the two of us were both like, okay, yeah, we're gonna do something. We're gonna do this.
Yeah.
I think for
Yeah.
me, it was also the obviously there's certain practical things that like everything has to align in just the right way. That what I'm looking for in this moment has to be what Brett is looking for, and the changes that were happening at Refinery. Like, I mean, these are the idea that that could be happening at exactly this moment. It's kind of mind blowing the amount of things that were sort of like lining up for this. But I think even beyond that, for me, one of the most important things is, who he is. And it's funny. I joke, like I got really tired of hearing people tell me what a great guy he is. Like every single time I was like, so I'm gonna go do this thing with Brett Winn. And it's like, oh, I have to tell you, like, he is just a mensch. He's one of the best people in the business. I'm like, okay, I get it. Like the first couple times it was really flat, like, oh, that's awesome. I'm so happy to hear it. But like, no, I honestly can't say it enough. But that's the thing. It's like, putting people first and leading with kindness, knowing we have to do the job, we have to get this done, we have to do it in the right way, but treating people with respect and actually genuinely caring about people. And I got to see that because Brett and I started our conversation about like, okay, we're going to do this and partner in this together, what, a month, 2 months before the staff at Refinery AV knew what was happening. And it's like a lot of our early conversations were not only about what we're going to do, but like, how are we going to talk to this person? And we want to make sure this person feels good about it. And like in a very, very positive way, just, showing the genuine care that he has for every single person here, it really touched me. And, I feel that same way. I care so much about so many of the people that I have worked with in the past at all the different shops. And, I'm caring about those people now that I've been here a couple months and starting to get to know them and see what a really awesome special team we have here. I think that thing, just really seeing the people more than just, you're not a number on a spreadsheet. You're not just a product of what your last cut is, but treating people with that kind of respect is something that I see as a core value, and I know Brett does as well. And that's
Well, and it's true testament to Ben. I mean, here someone's coming in as a partner, and a lot of people are expecting like, oh God, when's the hatchet coming down? When are people going to leave? And Ben, to your credit, you went and met with almost everybody one on one, face to face, in a very slow, very deliberate, way to connect with them and try to understand what makes them tick and why they're here and what they want to do and where they want to go. And really at a time where people could have been up in arms and fearful, you brought this ease and grace to the situation where I think everyone embraced it. And for me, you changed the dynamic of what Refinery AV was to what Rave is because you're here and because you bring a different energy. And yes, we're the similar in the way we deal with people, but you also have your own creative ideas and thoughts and the way you want things done. And it's awesome for me to see after 16 years um, of doing something this way to then now shift and be like, it's still what it was, and yet it's something completely new, and it's exciting.
So, Brett, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot
Do it.
because while you guys were having these conversations that I wasn't aware of, what does the phrase "dude, you're asking me for a fish, and I brought you to the fucking ocean"? Does that ring a bell for you, Brett? Do you know what I'm referring to? It kind of underscores everything that Ben's saying, but in the sweetest kind of humorous sort of giving him kind of shit. Do you remember? You know what I'm referring to, right?
I think so, but why
Yeah,
don't you
yeah.
go ahead and bring
So
it?
Yeah.
I'll share it a little bit. So, and I'm curious what your perspective of this was. I called Brett because we're an entrepreneurial family too, and we started this mobile. My kid, my middle kid, the older of my two boys, is running a mobile detailing company. So I know Brett, my friend Brett, and he's into cars. And I just I saw a picture of him with a Porsche on the Universal lot or something like that. And I'm like, oh, I should call Brett. Hey, Brett, would you mind talking to my kid? He's running this mobile detailing company we started. And he's like, "Oh yeah, absolutely. Why don't you guys come on Saturday at the thing at and there's a
Supercar
car,
Sunday.
yeah,
Supercar
Supercar
Sunday.
Sunday, and it's there was a car show. And it's the community college over
Pierce
Pierce
College.
College,
Every
yeah.
Sunday from like 7 to 10 or yeah.
And we spent a good amount of time with them, walking around, looking at cars. And Brett and my kid Jackie Boy were talking cars and business. And Brett, you did that. You did that business for a number of years when you were a
Oh,
kid, right?
when I was in high school. Yeah, I
Yeah,
did
yeah,
a
yeah.
car
So they
dealership.
had a
Yeah.
great conversation, and Jackie Boy Jackson doesn't quite understand the art of biz dev yet. So it's like, so can I wash your car? And Brett's response was like, dude, you're asking me for a fish. Look around you. I brought you to the fucking ocean. But
But he did come watch the cars.
oh, that's
Yes, a
good.
couple
That's
times.
good.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah.
the other thing, the timing of it was when you guys were in the midst of having these conversations, and you ended up getting information out of me, Brett, because you were asking in a diplomatic way, but like you were trying to get some information out of me, and I think I shared accurate information.
You
Even if
did.
I,
You
e-
did.
even if I knew the conversations were happening, I think I would have said exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Well, we were walking and talking, and I was like, "Wow, can you believe Ben's out of bond? Like, what's that all about?" As if I had no idea what was going on. But you've had a long relationship with Ben. You guys have known each other a long time, and it wasn't really fishing. And if you asked me if I knew what was going on, I would have told you.
Oh, yeah. And Ben
But
finally told me, Ben was protecting me from myself by not telling me.
Also, I was having a lot of fun with it. Like when you and I
Oh,
went
you
to get
totally
drinks,
were.
Corey,
You
like I
fucker.
already knew what was going on. I'd already made the decision at that point. But the way, because I think like you couldn't meet me right away. It was like a week later, and I'd already had like this dinner, I think. So we were I was kind of already set when you and I met.
So
And
the difference though is you like can solve a Rubik's cube in your sleep, and I'm just
yeah.
not that guy. I'm not a Wordle guy. I'm not a crossword. I'm not a solve the mystery guy. I don't think, and sometimes like I just don't want to know. There's information that if I had it, I don't want to have it. You know what I
Oh,
mean? Like,
100%.
yeah.
Yes.
So I was appreciative that you kept me sort of at arm's length in
Yeah.
this
Well, this
instance.
was also an interesting one because, again, once we had already kind of like, we already knew this was happening, and there was still a good month and a half, 2 months until the staff was going to find out about it. So it's like, it
Mm,
really, not only, it wasn't even just about keeping a secret, it was also just, it was like, how disrespectful would that be if you're working at a company and you find this out through the Hollywood rumor mill? Like, that's just not okay. And
yeah.
so, we really, it was so funny because at a certain point, like we had already made the decision. I was already shifting to wanting to tell people what I was doing. And I kept on telling them, here's what I'm doing. I'm going to this company. I'm doing this thing. Can't tell you what company it is, but everything else I'll tell you. Like I told them that like there's this company that's going through a little bit of a very amicable split, and I'm going to be partnering with this one and doing this thing, but I can't tell you which company. So it's
Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah.
the funny thing is, I really appreciate that because the serious we're kind of joking around about it, but the serious part of that is for other folks in the industry or even starting your career, having a sense of discretion. You know, sometimes you have to have conversations that are discreet,
Yeah.
and there's other considerations. Other people's livelihoods are at stake. Other companies' futures are at stake. And you know, and listen, if you're a good person, you want to look out for everybody's best interests. And I genuinely got the feel, as well as our pals from Bond. You know how much I love those guys. That you're looking out for everybody's best interest. What is an elegant solution to X, Y, and Z? I was happy to see good people getting together. You and Brett, Ben and Brett getting together, and our pals at Bond are on to a new exciting chapter, so that's awesome too. But anyway, sometimes some of these transitions can be hard, but I feel like people, they go through turning the chapter to a new chapter with good intentions. But yeah, sometimes you do have to be discreet about it. I guess as long as you're, keeping the main things the main thing, um, keeping your priorities in order, which I feel like everybody involved did. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just
But you know,
it's
it's business is interesting, right? Because there are laws and there are rules about taxes and about all this kind of stuff. But the truth is, the way you conduct business is a little bit of a free for all, right? You can kind of do it however you want. You can be a mensch or you can be a miser. You can be cruel or you can be kind. I mean, I remember early on and realizing all of a sudden, like you can kind of run this however you want. And for me, I always said, what are people gonna say to my kids about me later on down the line about the decisions I've made and how I've navigated these waters? And that was always my moral compass. Like, I just want people at the end of the day to come say great things about me to my kids.
yeah,
And if you
Mm,
kind of make decisions along those lines, even the hard decisions where you're like, I made a hard decision, and at the time, this person probably didn't think it was best for them. But the truth is, I did it with kindness and did it in a way that I can respect myself for doing it. Um, and I also believe in karmically, like do the right thing, man. It'll all come back around.
yeah.
Whatever
for
position
sure.
you're in your life,
100%.
This episode is brought to you by Make It Universal and Rotten Tomatoes presents Seen on the Screen, a bi-weekly podcast that takes listeners behind the scenes at NBC Universal, offering an intimate look at how film and storytelling have impacted the lives of its employees and creative community. Hosted by Jacqueline Coley, journalist and awards editor at Rotten Tomatoes, the series is home to vibrant conversations blending humor, introspection, and unforgettable anecdotes, and a bit of trivia. Jacqueline sets the tone for the show. As an established authority in entertainment, she brings warmth, curiosity, and insight into every episode, exploring film's ability to connect and transform. Make It Universal and Rotten Tomatoes presents Seen on the Screen is available to you on YouTube and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. I love the way you put that, Brett. It really does. It really does. Being being a mensch or being what was the other one? Being a
A
mensch or
mentor,
being
a miser.
a
Miser.
miser. I love it. So Ben, I'd been giving you crap about taking the entrepreneurial leap for a long time. What was it about this situation? Why did you decide? And like, and your family situation doesn't necessarily lend itself to taking a ton of risks. So what was it about now that you decided now was the time?
Well, how spiritual do you want me to get with this?
No, please.
um, um, well,
I might, if it's, if it's profound enough, I might share it on my politics and religion show. Come on.
right. No, please don't do that. Please don't do that. It's funny because Brett, like you said, that lunch, I mean, I was 1 week out of bond, and yeah, the first half of that lunch was all about like you need to for yourself. The number of people that had told me like, you need to do this for yourself, even in that first week, it was extensive, including my wife, who was saying like, you got to do this for yourself. And I just kept saying, no, 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 no. It's not like, yes, I understand in theory, but that's the kind of thing that you do with a lot of planning, with investment lined up, with a business plan. You don't just want to jump in. And I think that there was a combination of things. One is, like I said, the way that the stars all aligned, and the some of the specifics of where I happened to be at the time that I left Bond, and some of those things were really, it put me in a place where for the first time I could entertain it. But then the immediate, basically, here's what I'll say. Every reason in my mind when I'm arguing back and forth and figuring out like, no, you can't possibly do this because of this. Like, oh, well, no, you can because that's not a factor anymore. But you can't do it because of this. No, you can because of this. Every single thing that had stopped me in the past, working with Brett, uh, gave me the answer that I needed. It was
Mm,
like, well, here, a lot um, about leading a creative agency, but you never had to do it yourself. You never had to deal with those parts of it. I mean, I was an employee at Aspect, whether it was president or not. Like I was still working for someone. I did not have to start that business. I did not have to start Bond. There was always someone else taking care of that. I don't know how to do that, but I mean, my partner is the president of EO for like all of like he knows all about it. And the more that I talk to him, it's like, well, hold on. I know how to do this. I know how for, several years at Aspect and almost 9 at Bond, I built and grew creative agencies. And, that both went on to win Agency of the Year multiple times. Like, I know how to do a certain part of this. The stuff that I don't know how to do, Brett knows how to do in his sleep. So it's like automatically I feel like okay, that's pointing me in that direction. All of the financial issues that you have to do when you're doing a startup. And I remember even not even just starting my own company, but even the early days of Bond, for those first 6 months, just being able to deliver the work when it was like me and one freelance editor in the first week, it's like, well, okay, but we have a foundation in Refinery AV that has everything you could possibly need. And even some of those things you know, like not having a music supervisor. And then when Brian Murphy, who's the music supervisor at Bond, I mean, he sets the bar and sets the gold standard. And I was like, but how am I going to do this without somebody like Murph? And then when I finally told Murph where I was going, and he's like, oh, you have Joe Pistoresi? Like, he's like, my mentor kind of thing. Like, I was like, oh, okay, we're going to be fine. Like, everything that could have told me, like, what are you going to do without this, or what are you going to do without that, and how are you going to go without being able to just bring in business right away? It's like, well, no, every single thing, everything that could possibly tell me don't do this was answered. And so, like I said, the stars aligning and just knowing where which I didn't know at the time, but like knowing now, like where Brett and Refinery were at that time, it's like this. It really could not have felt more right in pretty much every way for me. So
that's
that's
great.
that. Does that answer your question? I think
It
it's
does.
a
It
bit of it.
does.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Okay.
I appreciate that. Now, obviously, a lot has changed for you. One of the things I loved about, really digging into the new site, um, is how personal, collectively personal you're making it. And that video of like kind of introducing you as a collective, if you will, um, was different than a lot of other, a lot of other sites that we see. And you shared it online and social and stuff like that. One of the things that you said, I don't know if you meant it this way, but I took it kind of more contextually. One of the things you said on that reel is last year changed the game, so we changed with it. I know you were referring to the evolution from Refinery to Rave Collective, but I'm curious. It wasn't just last year that changed the game. It's been the last few at least since the last time we talked, and it was
Yeah.
already changing at warp speed.
Yeah.
But I guess, like, how have you observed the business changing in this last year and these last 5 years? With, we don't have to talk about the world and the pandemic and the fires and the elections and the everything, but just the business itself. How have you observed it changing, and how are you changing with it?
I mean, I think it's a multifaceted question. And it was interesting because I was just listening to your podcast with Benny,
Mm,
which I know you finally gotten Benny on the two parts. And thank you for mentioning Pam in that, which was very sweet. I played it for her and she loved it. Um, but the one thing that Benny's right, I mean, in many things he's right, but I'm saying
yeah.
one of the things he drew upon was this idea of like, a big agency with big overhead doesn't work anymore. And
Mm,
so that's part of it, right? And yes, we have an office, but it's like 2,900 square foot office with 7 offices and a conference room. And really, it's more of a creative pit than an office, right? It's an
mm,
idea of like, come here and let's be together so we can brainstorm in person and come up with different ideas and solutions. Um, and ironically, having 37,000 square feet in the Galleria with Refinery, and we couldn't get 5 people to come in. Now, all of a sudden, we have 2,900, and I'm like pushing people away, going, it's kind of full today. Like, you can't come into the office. I'm so sorry. Um, but it is this idea of um, less overhead and more creative, right?
mm,
It's just about the creative. And the other thing with the collective of like the idea, and it's such a funny word collective because when I said it, I'm like, I don't want it to be rave creative. I want it to be rave collective. And the big thought mentality was um, in a collective, there's a collection of people who do specific things, right? And we can really focus on it's not about building rave to be this mass ship, it's about a collective group of people. So Ben being the partner and head of creative advertising, I can also have Jim Pasco, who's the head of creative content. And his team can work over here in a bubble and do what they do really well. And Ben can work with the team over here and do what they do really well. And then we're branching into brands, right? Into brand advertising. And so Stuart Hopewell's working on that. And that's another collective over here. I've got another guy who I'm talking to, which Ben, I just getting texts while we're here about branching into sports and live sports, which is a big thing. And again, I'm okay saying I'm not the guru when it comes to live sports, and Ben's not the guru when it comes to live sports. But let's all agree, live sports is a huge part of the entertainment marketing future because it's
Mhm.
like the last place where real ad dollars are going to play part in what happens. And even having a spot, which I'm going to brag a little, but even having a spot for Andor play in the Oscars is like there's more eyeballs on that than there is for most of the stuff we're doing on television these days because it just doesn't happen the same. And so it was
Mhm.
this great, to me, this great idea of like, that's cool. It doesn't have to be about the big. It can be about these little collections of specialists.
Specialists, yeah.
Sorry, strike that, reverse it. Specialists.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and one of the things I noticed about looking at the work was that it wasn't just like 2.5 minute pieces and 30-second pieces. It was like all different kinds of stuff, music videos and 15s and
And
traditional trailers and
long
yeah,
form. Some of the creative content that Jim's working on now is like 30 minutes.
yeah,
They're like full episodes that
yeah,
run on platform as their own unique thing, which is crazy because now we're like not just making trailers, we're making content.
yeah,
Um, and it's
yeah.
fun and it's fun to allow people to find their passion and their niche and allow them to run, you know.
I do love that collective. You reminded me when I first started producing theater in New York. I immediately took the RE instead of the ER in theater because I was pretentious that way and still
That's
am.
right. That's right. You
But
Shakespearean actor, you.
yes, that's right. But the first shows
I'm
we produced were CSN Productions because it was about me, right? And then we had Theater X because I was trying to be cool, and it was when the X generation was first being defined, Gen X. Um, the one that I ran here for about 15 years, it was an ensemble. To your point,
Mm.
because it really is about writers and actors and directors and producers. And, you know, I've joked about this before, but it's really not a joke. It's like, well, the producer, yeah, does this, and this, and it's kind of like, I don't know, fancy title or whatever. But really, the producer is the guy that if nobody shows up to clean the bathroom on opening night, that's you. So that's why we're an ensemble, Anyway, so and I'm curious about because you have a different perspective, Ben. You've been in a couple of different shops. You've seen the evolution of the industry, and you've had to be responsive. I'm curious, when you say last year changed the game, or if you want to say the last 5, 10 years have changed the game, so we changed with it. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I actually think it's a lot of what Brett was already talking about. I think that where we place our value, when you're doing like, I mean, look, I was at Ant Farm, which was at the Grove. And even then, in that 2008, 9 time when the industry was just changing a lot and there was a lot of implosion and downsizing and this and that, like, the number of times at Andron people talked about how like, wow, we're paying all this money to rent space at the Grove. 2,900 square feet feels really good right now. It's not without its challenges, but if we can figure it out, which is what we are actively doing every day, if we can figure it out, how much of an advantage does that give us? Where we're able to put our money into the people and that's the most important thing. We don't have massive overhead and rent and all of this that we have to pay for. So I think that's important as we've seen shifting. We've seen, TV campaigns that went from, I mean, I want to say that on Kung Fu Panda 2 at Aspect, we cut 300 V1s for spots. It was like crazy, but like, so you don't see that anymore,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
But so that's true. But at the same time, people always like to forget about at that time, we were really only talking about the big 6 studios.
Hmm.
And there were, how many you could count on, 2 hands and 2 feet, the number of clients that there were in the business to go after. It was
Right.
just the big studios, and each one had somewhere between 2 and 5 executives that you could hit up for work. Now there are dozens of places. Everybody's putting out content. So yeah, you don't have TV campaigns anymore. You got that shifted, but that doesn't mean there's not an incredible amount of work and a lot more opportunity out there. So if you can just sort of pay attention and be nimble, and that's what we're trying to do.
I have
And
an
it doesn't just
idea.
stop.
Go ahead.
And it doesn't just stop with overhead. I mean, that's the most obvious answer that we can just point to. But we've been talking about this too. It's like, paying attention every day and saying, like, what can we do new? And we've talked about that. One of our goals for this year is to identify another new business opportunity. And it's not about a new business like a new client. It's about a new way of looking at things based on the way that the world is right now,
Mm.
and really kind of like getting out of our comfort zone in that way and out of that mentality of this is how we do things. This is how we've always done things. Like we're not limited by that anymore. And the more we can embrace that and really look for those opportunities, the better off we're going to be.
What are some of the opportunities that you've considered? Like, how wide of a net are you casting for that?
I don't want to talk about that. That's a competitive edge. You
We're
can
working on a
ask us.
formula.
You
Well,
can
I
ask
mean,
us all about that a year from now.
Okay,
yeah,
fair
I
enough.
will. I will say one of the things that EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, has lent itself to me and forced me to grow is this idea of like we always have to be learning and growing, right? We always have to be learning something new about ourselves or about the work that we do. And as soon as we stop growing, we're stagnant. And I think that's the problem is like people get comfortable. It's like that scene in Rocky 3. Where he's like, Mickey says to Rocky, he's like, then the worst thing that could happen to you happened. You got civilized, and you gotta, but it is that idea of like, you can't just rest on your laurels ever in any business. And I
Yeah.
think that that's one of the things that we're doubling down on of like, keep growing, keep pushing, keep trying something new, keep figuring out, is there another niche? Is there another part of the market that's not being hit? Is there another way that we can spin this? Um, because that's where the greatest success happens, and that's where you're not the same person today as you will be tomorrow that you were yesterday, right? And it sounds cliche and sounds euphoric, but it is. It's like you can't ever stop pushing, and I think that that's kind of where the backbone of what we're trying to do is.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned EO. I do need to mention this. I don't know if I've ever mentioned his name on this program, but I have mentioned the fact that I was working at a company called Artisan Creative
Yep.
when I first got into this business, the headhunting business. And my boss, who's a mentor to this day, this is going back to the 90s that I worked there for a couple of years, a guy named Jamie Duragi. And Jamie was the president of EO Los Angeles before you were. I don't know if there were how many presidents there were in
Yeah,
between, but
every year there's a new president. So
yeah,
Jamie was probably, I don't know, 8 years ago or so, but Jamie's one of the like godfathers of EO that like as a president you're gonna have a lunch with Jamie, and Jamie's gonna sit down and be like, "Hey, have you thought about trying this or trying that?" And Jamie has been a mentor to me,
yeah,
and also come and like taught my board and worked with my board on how to do things better and different. And his wife Kathy is amazing as well, and has
yeah,
worked with my wife Pam and how to um there's a spousal program as well as just the entrepreneurial part. And so I love this, and Jamie is just an incredible human being who is constantly learning and growing, and now he's like taking couples out so that they can learn and grow and get to the next evolution of who they are. It's really it's awesome when you open your mind up and start exploring and seeing that like, oh wow, there are great people doing amazing things out there in all walks of life. Um, and if
yeah,
you just open yourself up to it, you can see it. But if you stay in your bubble, you're gonna miss it.
yeah. Now we've sort of been talking about this throughout the conversation so far, but I really want to ask it kind of on point. We have been through a lot, especially over the last 4 or 5 years. I'm curious how you've personally gotten through it, as well as how you've helped the teams that you've led get through. Ben is holding up his drink. Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the, we haven't had our, an episode dedicated to mental health. I've shared some of the things that I've done, but I'm curious the tools in your toolbox, how you've gotten through it, but also, you're also leaders of people, how you've helped your people and teams get through it.
I think this goes back to something we were talking about internally about perspective and priorities. And I think that a lot of times when we say like, going through this health scare or the fires or any of these things, like kind of remind you what's important. And I think that it's very easy to look at that cynically from a business perspective and say, well, so you're saying your family's more important than the work because like if your family's important from the work, then you don't care about the work, you don't care about the company. And it was this realization that we had as we were talking about priorities that it's that couldn't be more uh, opposite from the truth. The fact of the matter is that when you are grounded and centered and you know what is the most important thing and what is your North Star in your personal life, it puts you in a more grounded space, which means that you can approach problems and issues and challenges in a more objective way. I feel like in the last 5 years, there have been a lot of times where we've been scared and stressed, and you're operating from a place of anxiety, and like, what happens if the strikes don't end, or what happens if movie theaters never open again, or whatever it is. Like if we're operating from a place of anxiety and fear, we're not going to be able to do our best. I don't think anyone's able to do their best from that perspective, but certainly not in the creative industry. So being able to kind of take a step back and understand what the priority is and what is the most important thing in your life, and having that perspective just makes you better at all of this. And so that's where I can't say what I've done to do it better. What I can say is that the times that I have been stressed in the last 5 years and operating from that place, I've forgotten that. And the times that I've been at my best, and being the rock that I've been able to be for my team, and as a leader when they're stressing out, and being able to kind of bring them back in and kind of bring that calm, I've always been operating from that kind of a place.
Yeah, I'll say that navigating the pandemic, um, I think when I look back in my career, I will be most proud of that particular time because it taught me so much, and I'm so proud of the way we kind of rose to the challenge of what that meant. Um, we created a culture club per se, to try and rally the teams. We brought in psychologists. I brought in yoga teachers. We brought in um, drink nights and wine tastings and all kinds of stuff to kind of bond us when we're all going through this time that we had never experienced before, and ways to unite us and come together. And it was the greatest challenge I think we've ever been faced with. And at the same time, I look back and I knew that when it was going through it, then like, oh, we're gonna blink, and then I'll be like, hey, remember that year we were in lockdown? Um, and yet at the same time, everything's simplified. Like, I don't know about you guys, but my wife and I do a lot and we're part of a lot. And so there are weeks where like we're going out every night because we have either client dinners or we have friends or we have events. And the pandemic kind of boiled it back down to the essentials, right? It brought you
Yeah.
back to like what's really important, and that family is really important, and the bonding that you can do when you're home together. Um, and I hope that we all take that experience with us into the future as something of like, yes, it was rough, and yes, there are times that were terrible, but it was also like an eye-opening uh, moment in time that we'll probably never forget. And I look back with great fondness of like we did art nights at home where we all painted around the dining room table, and my wife and I used to do date night, which was like the hardest part of pandemic of not getting a date night.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point my son was like, "Hey, why don't you guys have a date night and Bella and I will be your waiters?" And we did it. We ordered in food and they served us. And my son came to the table. He's like, okay, so for dessert, we have ice pops and we have frozen bonbons. And dad, if you
Wait,
would like, if you like, I would pour you a scotch. And I'm like,
how old is
uh,
Darby now?
13.
So Darby's like 8 years old.
He was 8 years old. Yes. He was 8 years old saying, Dad, do you want me to make you a Manhattan? I'm like, only if it's a perfect Manhattan.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's great. So, okay, so I have a few fun questions, and I didn't necessarily prep you for this, so it might put you on the spot as well. And then we'll start to wrap up. One is, I'm curious what your favorite campaign or piece of creative advertising is throughout history, not necessarily your own, or maybe it is your own because you're that kind of guy.
Oof.
Well, I can say when I was working at Studio City, I remember the trailer for Mission Impossible 2, that skip cut. And
Hmm.
when that dropped, I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And it was, still popcorn type movie, and was that one was John Woo, right? That was the kind of crazy one. But I just remember Skip doing the sequence of editorial that had emotion to it. It was like Tom Cruise jumped out of a plane and flew through the air downward, and it landed with this foot stomp that led into a flamenco dance. And I was like, that is fucking brilliant. And
Yeah.
I just remember looking at that going, if one day I could accomplish something to that degree, I would be thrilled.
All right. So mine, it's I've talked about this one before. It's the teaser for Matrix.
Oh,
Um, the first Matrix, because I was not in the business yet. In fact, I had not yet moved to LA. I think I had just finished film school and saw the trailer for Matrix, and it was the first time that I kind of became aware of the trailer itself as an art form. Like up until then, the trailer is like, oh, cool, here's that movie that's coming out, and I'm excited for that movie. Therefore, I'm going to want to watch the trailer and see what shots are in there and all that. But like that one in particular, it hit me in just the right way because Matrix had visuals that we had never seen before. But there's also a lot of other movies that came out around the same time that had new kinds of visuals. There was a lot of experimentation, and CG was becoming like, such a big thing at that time. So it's like there were a lot of things that had visuals that you hadn't seen before, but it started to just kind of become noise. And that voiceover of Morpheus, like, did you ever have a dream that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? how would you know the difference between the real world and the dream world? And that just gave context to the whole thing. Because now as I'm watching, it's like I don't know if what I'm looking at is real or a dream or what the fuck is this? And then he says, no one can be told what it is. You got to see it for yourself. And I was like, okay, that was just you framed this thing in just the right way, and it was like it was just awesome. It touched me, and it made me. I mean, it did what Matrix did, which is like kind of open our minds to all these other possibilities. And you know, I think that it was only later that I learned that had been cut by Phil DeCord, who
Yeah.
is now,
Who now works
cutting
with us
in the bay 20 feet over there. And he's
That's
working on a
awesome.
trailer for me right now. So
That's
that's
great.
really cool.
That's
And I will
great.
say, it's funny because when you asked the question, I thought like, do I talk about my own personal favorite that I did or the thing? And I was like, wait, they're actually the same because my favorite thing that I've ever done was the iterative trailer for Matrix 4.
Oh,
Whereas like the trailer that changed every time you watched it, there were over 230,000 different ways that
oh,
you could see that
right.
trailer. That was the thing with the two pills where you chose red
Yeah.
or blue. And that I'm very proud of that work. I've told the story to people before, but I'll say it like so uh, I was at Bond. Seth Altoff and one of the heads of digital had just gone and they discovered this technology that had been done as part of a DuPont commercial where it's like iterative technology that allows for um, every user to experience it in different ways. And they brought it back and they kind of came to me and said, okay, imagine a trailer that changes every time. Go. And I'm like, well, how does that even work? It was like, it was just technology. Like, how could we possibly do that for a trailer? It doesn't make sense. And so for a year or more, I worked with the AV team and the writers to try to figure out how to do it. And we had tried to pitch it on a couple different things and it didn't really work out. And then it was pandemic, it was 2020, but towards the fall. So we were starting to get together, but none of the bars or restaurants were open. John Stanford, who is now running marketing at Warner Brothers, had that movie. And he came over and we sat in my backyard and I brought out 4 different bottles of bourbon and we tasted them. And by the third or fourth one, I was like, oh, dude, hold on, there's this technology where a trailer could change every time you watch it. I was like, that sounds crazy. And I was like, we got to do that for Matrix. It's like, yeah, I don't even understand how that could work, but yeah, let's do it. And so like I'd love to say like that the spark of that was born in my backyard over bourbon during pandemic. So he said there were good things that came out of pandemic that might not have happened
I
otherwise.
thought you were going
So
to say there were good things that
um,
came out of bourbon.
yeah. Oh
Yeah,
well, there's a lot of
always
good
good
things that came
things
out.
come out of bourbon.
I've got 5 children that came out of bourbon. What are you talking about? Like,
That's great.
can we take that part out? Yeah, take that part out. Anyway,
I have another one funny story as far as trailers go. So my first trailer that I finished on was a movie called The Hot Chick with Rob Schneider. And this was
this
early
has got to
on.
be. Is Mike Sutherly involved in this story? He's got to be
You know
involved
what?
somehow.
I wish
hold
he
on.
was. I feel like at that
No,
point
he
he'd
is.
already
But
left.
wait, hold on. Brett, pause for 1 second because you did that trailer you were at Trailer Park at that
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
I was at Creative Domain. Mike Sutherly was at Creative Domain, and I was working on the Hot Chick TV campaign, which Mike Sutherly brought in.
There you
So
go.
yes,
Okay,
he
full
is
circle.
involved, sort of. But
How did I know?
sorry,
How did I know?
continue.
But it's so funny because right, how many times do people come to you and be like, "Oh man, you work for Met Trailers? Like, hey, do you know Tom Cruise? Do you know?" And they list off all these actors. And you're like, very rarely, unless they're a producer on the film, do I ever get to meet any of the actors. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's just not a thing. Um, However, when I was cutting the hot chick, we were like in the final stages of the trailer. And at one point, I was out to lunch working on pitching a broadcast client. And Tim Net called and he goes, "Where are you?" I'm like, "I'm at lunch with, ABC or whatever." And he's like, "You have to get back to the office right away because um, Jack and Adam are coming in to work on your trailer."
No way.
And I was like, "Wait, Adam who?" He's like, "Adam Sandler's coming into work." I'm like, "Oh shit, okay."
And Jack
So,
G. Oh man.
and Jack G, yeah, yeah. And so I come back and they're like, "I hope you don't mind. We put you in a big office because you can't be in your little shithole edit bay that we put you in." So now all of a sudden I'm like in this new bay working on someone else's system. So I sit down and they introduce me. I'm like, "Hey, hey," and we sit down and I'm about to get started. And Adam Sandler looks at me, and goes, "Hey, you know who you look like?" And I said, "No, who?" He goes, Fred Savage. You ever get that before? and And
You
I
do
don't know,
actually.
and I don't know why, but like I'd gotten that my whole life, right? Ever since I was in high school.
Okay.
So I don't know why, but in that moment, I turned around and with a total deadpan, I looked at Adam and I said, "Yeah, I've been getting that my whole life. Thanks for bringing it up again." And I turned back around and started, and then I stopped and I'm like, "Holy shit! Did I just do that to Adam
You
Sandler?"
just gave Adam Sandler shit.
I gave him shit, and I turned back around and he had the biggest grin on his
Of
face.
course he did.
And then from then on, he's like, "Hey, Savage, why don't you trim that back a few frames?"
I have so
Yeah,
many
that
people
was
who work with on Sandler films, like guys on at Video Village and guys who work in the trailers. Friends of ours on the trailer side, and he's number one. He's very very loyal. Like once you
oh
work with
yeah.
him, you're going to work with him. But also he's just like he's mishpat. Like once you're it, like he's
He's
just a
just a
regular
guy.
guy.
He's like coming in to do the thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
All
That
right,
was
so now I hope you won't have too much fun with this, but you get to turn the tables on me. And do you have any questions for me?
I do.
Be gentle.
So for those of you who don't know, Corey has been a headhunter for a long time and has moved people around from different agencies. What's your greatest success in that role where you took someone and put them somewhere else and it led to this crazy, wild success?
The first thing that comes to mind are the placements, the quote unquote placements that I did that I didn't get paid for, at least immediately. So, for example, they were placements, but they were really putting people together before there was even a company.
Hmm.
I don't know if I've ever shared this explicitly, but I introduced Seth Gavin to Chad Miller before there was ever an AV squad. Uh,
What?
yeah, in fact, freaking Stu Weiss. Like so Seth at the time was considering it was after MGM. I think it was after he had a stretch at another agency for about a year, and he was really thinking about going back to the studio to a studio job. And we were having I wasn't the only one he was having these conversations with, but at that time Final Cut was really coming into prominence. But Seth was when he was an editor, it was very, very expensive to set up an edit bay. And I'm like, Seth, you could set up a completely tricked out edit bay for like 10, 15 grand max. At the time, he was living in this house with a pool house in the back. I'm like, you could set it up in your pool house. And again, I'm sure I'm not the first one who said it to him, but we were having these conversations. And the first thing he said to me is like, okay, so yeah, that's great. And if you could get me Skip Chassan, then we're in business. I'm like, Seth, you don't freaking need Skip. You are Skip, but maybe you need a guy who's like really coming into his own, or a girl who's coming into their own, that they can be sort of your hands. You can mentor them and bring them, and they'll bring another generation of perspective and aesthetic, and that's ultimately the conversation that led to Chad. Now, Chad Miller. So Chad's reel, I have to give Seth a lot of credit because Chad's reel wasn't shit at the time. Like he didn't have any finishes. In fact, at their 10-year or 15-year anniversary, they showed the reel that Chad showed Seth when he got the job, and there just wasn't anything on it. But Seth does what Chad does to this day, and all those guys at AV Squad, and so many people, some of the best creative directors around town do, is what I call seeing the talent through the credits. He saw the editors thinking, he saw the creatives thinking, and he said, "I'm going to give this kid a shot," and that's ultimately. But even then, when Seth and Chad got together, it wasn't an overnight success. It was, a couple, 3 years before they got on Vantage Point. And then it was another 6 months before they got on Fast and Furious. And then it was, so it was not an overnight success. It was not obvious to anybody, but that was one of the placements that I did. I never got paid for it, but it was one of the best, and now look what they have. They have this wonderful company, a lot of people, the best people, not just the best creatives and the best business, but like truly good, wonderful people, a collection of good, wonderful people are working there. Another one is similar. Again, it might be out of place sharing this, but I don't think so. But really, it's the founding of Bond. Seth was at a place. Seth Altoff was at a place where I had been encouraging in him for a number of years to be entrepreneurial, but him being kind of intellectually and emotionally mature, knew it wasn't his time until it was his time. But he was also wise enough to say he's the best I've ever known in the industry on the business side of this industry. And being the best, he understands that his job was to be a servant leader. Therefore, he couldn't be a business guy that had these like widgets that he was selling or widgets that he was that were operations, but like creative people. So he's like, yeah, Corey, but it's not a business led business; it's a creative led business. So I introduced him to Pat, and then separately, I introduced him to the infamous LSG, who I love all these guys, and then they started talking all together, and Brian Setzer and those guys. And again, it wasn't a placement per se, because there was no company for them to be a client of mine. But I would say that those introductions that like you belong, you need to have a conversation. I don't know where it's going to go, but you need to have a conversation with this person, and you need to have a conversation. And then it went somewhere that I could have never have dreamed of. But I just knew that there was something there. The ingredients were there for the right kind of gumbo. So maybe I
So
I
you
hope I didn't overshare or talk out of school in any of those.
no, so you introduced Chad and Seth Gavin, and
Yeah,
you introduced the owners at Bond,
yeah,
and you tried to introduce me and Brett.
I did.
So listen, we're in good standing.
You eventually took my. It took a
Yeah,
while, but you eventually took my
yeah.
advice. No, no, no. But I can't take. Obviously, I can't take any credit other than just thinking these are good people. They should know each other. And then look what the magic. Is that the entertainment advertising version of a Yenta? Like, is that?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
here's a question that I have for you,
Okay.
Corey,
All right.
because you mentioned a Yenta. Yenta was the name of a character in a play,
Yeah.
right?
Fiddler on the
Who
Roof. Yeah.
ultimately, correct, yeah. But that term, like, it transcended the character and just became an actual like concept, like a Benedict Arnold, right? Like someone who is like their
Lashon Hara.
name
Yeah.
stops being about the person and starts being about the concept.
Yeah.
So I will say that your name, from the time that I've known you, you were just like a guy, and now it's like, Corey Nathan is a concept of
Shit.
like,
Oh fuck.
like no, right? I mean, like, I don't go talk to Corey Nathan about this. It's like people don't, they say it almost like a term, like, don't go talking to Corey Nathan. We'll figure it out. Like, how have you been able? You've been doing this a really long time. Like now that everyone knows, like, oh, if Corey's there, he's going to probably shake things up and move people around. Like, how have you been able to continue placing people the way that you still are when everyone knows what Corey Nathan is?
Yeah. So I think it's a really fair question, if not a fair challenge. So when I
And I
first
say it, by the way, hold on. I just want to say, I say it with absolute respect. You have placed me at a number of things. I consider you a friend. I'm not trying to like
No, no,
talk
it's
shit.
okay.
I'm just asking you a real question.
Yeah. So when I first started, the advantage that I had was nobody knew who the hell I was. So
Right.
my name would be announced over the loudspeaker at 323-337-0300 at Cimarron. And, I could get through to any edit bay and have a conversation with any producer, any editor, anybody over there. Um, and but eventually the name got out. When Barbara called me, "Who are you and why are you calling all my editors?" So eventually the name got out. But so back in the day, there were people who were really intimidating, really, really, and not to say that aren't intimidating people now, but when you had to be across the table from a Bob Farina for when I was still in my 20s or early 30s, that was very, very intimidating. The one thing I had though was that I knew that I was doing things that annoyed people, especially guys like Farina and Smitty, but I knew that I was doing it in a way that was they didn't like it, but they couldn't argue with the ethics of it. So I did a couple things. One was I didn't break people out of contracts. That was an obvious line that I wouldn't cross. But two was when I was calling over at Ant Farm, Rod and Amanda and Andy and all the editors, you go right down there, Jan Horvath and Eric Archer and, Art Mandrala and all those freaking Hall of Famers that they had, one after the other said, "You know what, Corey, thanks for calling, but I'm really happy here." I respected that. I didn't see it as my job to go a step further and try to convince them otherwise. So when Mike and Barbara, they took me to this Italian restaurant, I sat in the semicircle booth where Mike was on one side and Barbara was on the other side, and I couldn't get out of the table. I was able to look them both in the eyes and say, this is how I did it. And props to you, because you're doing something right. Everybody's happy at your company. Nobody wants to even meet me for lunch, let alone consider going somewhere else. In Farina's case, I did recruit a few people from Cimarron over the years. And he's like, well, why the fuck? I gave him all kinds of, I'm like, Bob, for some people, it's not just about the money. For some people, they were stuck in comedy world, rom-com world, and they wanted to be working on action. Or this person, wasn't getting to work with Chiquino, who is like just, brilliant, passionate, creative, and they weren't getting to work with her. They wanted to work with directly with some other producers and stuff. I told them the reason why people moved, and it wasn't just about the money. So that's one of the ways that I've dealt with it. Just being able to look somebody in the eye, and also listen. I haven't always done everything perfectly. I've made mistakes. But when I have made mistakes, I've tried to own up to them. Just a couple of weeks, I'm not going to tell you what the situation was, but just a couple of weeks ago, I sent a text to somebody that listen, I really screwed up. I fucking royally screwed up. And I sent the person a text and I said, listen, this didn't go well. I wish it could have gone better. And, I wish you all the best. I hope that maybe at some point we can get together and mend fences, and it is what it is. Like, it's not their responsibility to respond to me, but it's my responsibility to own up when I fuck up, and to try to make it right to the best of my ability. So that's the other thing I think I've tried to do. It is, but this business, it can be tracked. The nature of what I do, the people that I'm taking talent from are not going to like it. But if I do it in the right way, with the best interests of the person in mind, and my clients in mind, and I can still look the person in the eye across the table when they call me out for it and say, this is why I did it, this is why it happened, and maybe even help them improve their company, then it's the best I can do. It's a hard business. So nobody said it was going to be easy.
Well, I will tell you, to your credit, for a long time I was like, why isn't Corey Nathan talking to me? I use that as like the compass of like, how well are you doing in your career before Corey Nathan comes to talk to you to kind of push you to see what's next. And
The
for a
phone
long
goes
time,
both ways, by the way.
I was like, fuck that guy. He's not talking to me. I'm good.
But so the phone does go both ways. You can call me, and I always appreciate it, like, because I feel like I'm not cool anymore. Once I started getting gray hair, which was like in my 20s, by the way, but I felt like I'm not cool anymore. But when I get a call from somebody who's doing some kick-ass work, even if they're not like doing the 2.5 minute pieces, playing in the big theaters yet, but like I look at their work, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. That's so beyond. And then they like reach out to, hey, Corey, I just think it's the coolest thing. So, even if I can't necessarily place them at this point, it's just good. Like, it's good to be. It's a small industry,
Yeah.
and it's good to get to know people. Not just me, but like everybody in it. It's good to get to know other creatives in the industry across companies, and just like, just inspire each other and help each other and lift each other up, So even if at the end of a lunch or, coffee or whatever, we just like, oh, I just learned about this cool new person who's doing cool new things. That's a win, I think. And then sometimes it leads to something else, or sometimes it's like 5 years down the road and it leads to something, So that's the other thing is a lot of times I'm not like, this is another secret to my business, is like, when I call somebody, I'm genuine. Like 99% of the time, I'm not looking to do a deal. I'm genuinely like, there's either somebody that I miss hanging out with and it's been way too long and we haven't hung out, and like, let's go hang out. Or there's somebody that I've heard really nice things about, and I'm like, I don't know you, and you're in my school, and let's hang out. Let's go get lunch,
Oh,
And
I would love to jump in there because what you're saying, I know that a lot of people would hear that and say, that's bullshit. He's a headhunter. It's always got to have something. To your credit, I believe that that is 100% genuine. First of all, I say like having met you going into our first meeting 20 plus years ago
no, it
with people
wasn't.
saying,
It was like 2 years ago.
yeah, it was 2 years
We're
ago.
not that old.
We had a head of black hair, both of us. Um, No, but I think that like I went into our first meeting being warned, and I found you to really, it wasn't just about like where can I place this guy to make money. It was more, I mean, you talked to me about fit in a way. Like that was the first thing. Like I was just looking to leave creative domain and go to my first, or like make my first move, go to my second job. And I was thinking about money. I was thinking about what's the hot shops. And you started talking to me about fit and understanding who I was. And I think that I mean, you've placed me at a couple places, but also you've been on my payroll at different places, and
Yeah.
you've sent me candidates, and every single one is telling me exactly why that person isn't happy where they are. It's not about like, hey, let's steal this person who's doing awesome at this shop and is happy, let's steal them. That's not your thing. You're always like, this is kind of where they're at in their lives and in their careers and what they're looking for. So um I really do believe that that is genuine, and you like being a Yenta. You like putting people together, and I think that's great.
It's a lot more fruitful that way too. Like when you're thinking about the human being as opposed to like, oh, this is how much money they're making. This is their credit list. Yeah, I got it. I could get that in like
Yeah,
literally like 10 seconds,
yeah,
30 seconds maybe. But like the human being and who's going to be there and have a really nice chapter in their lives and their careers, 5, 10, 15 years, like, that's the win for everybody. So
yeah.
it takes a little bit more. Anyway,
Well, I just have to say thank you, Corey, for paying attention, because I will tell you that as an editor, as a producer, as a creative director, whatever, the fact that someone outside of our industry is paying attention to what we're doing and then makes a call to talk to us about what we're doing, it feels really good. And I know that in a lot of worlds, it's like, oh God, Corey, don't take my person, don't do this, whatever. But the truth is, from the actual creative doing the work, getting a call from Corey Nathan was always a highlight. So
oh, that's great. That's awesome. And for the owners of other companies, you're welcome to call me if you want to
no,
know
you're
why
not.
your people are meeting me. No, because I don't take I don't take a lot of clients now. I can count on one hand how many like companies I would take on as clients. Um, Actually, I don't know if I'm going to include that. But in all seriousness, it is a small industry, and I root for companies to be good companies because a good if companies are good, then our industry is good. I'd rather have my favorite companies have healthy competition and good competition because it makes everybody else better. So if there's a company that I don't work with that they're wondering why their people are leaving, like trees like leaves on a tree in Maine in October, I'll let you know. Look, so we can have that conversation. Anyway, I really appreciate. We did cover a lot. I know I kept Brett here way longer than
No,
he
no,
meant
I'm
to be
good.
here.
It's all good.
But is there anything we didn't cover that you want to add before we start to close shop?
For me, it's just about if you're an up and comer in the industry, I hope that some of this was good fodder and good inspiration for you to keep pushing forward. I mean, the greatest successes come from 1,000 failures before that, right? And we've all been through it, and we've all gone through those times where we didn't win and we didn't get what we wanted. But I hope that if you're out there and this is what you want to do, that you'll have the perseverance to push through and get to the next one. And whatever you learn that you didn't do that time, I hope you'll do it the next time, because that's really how greatness is formed. And there isn't a single person in our industry who hasn't been through whatever you're going through and hasn't gotten the people looking down on you, or people feeling like, oh, this kid will never make it, or this kid doesn't have anything. I hope that you'll push through that, and I hope that you'll rise to the occasion, because there's greatness in everybody, and it's such a wild ride, but you are in control of your destiny. And I know this feels altruistic, but I'm just a kid from Jersey who really had no business being where we are today. And if I'm not a testament to that, then I hope it's inspiration for people to go chase their dreams.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Ben, Brett, this was really fun hanging out with you. I'm glad you suggested you led me to stumble. Have a good drink and enjoy this time with you. Um, there's something in Proverbs about that. But yeah, seriously, I enjoy hanging out with you fellas. So thanks for
Same
doing
here.
this. Yeah.
Yeah,
Same here.
for
Thank
sure.
you.
You bet. You bet. And as always, please remember to rate us, review us wherever you get your podcast. It really does help us in the rankings so that other people can discover this program and enjoy these conversations and learn something from it. Follow us on all the socials. I forgot to ask you, how do we find, it's ravecollective.com?
Yes. Okay,
is that the best place to find you? Ravecollective.com?
100%.
All right,
Yep,
awesome.
yep.
Awesome. And I am at Corey S. Nathan, at COREYS as in Sam, NATHAN, at Corey S. Nathan. And ravecollective.com will be in the show notes in case you missed it. Check out our awesome sponsors, brought to you by Golden Trailer Awards and Epicenter Music, by Brent Allen Hagel, you know him as Trailer VO Brent, and by Make It Universal, and Rotten Tomatoes presents Scene on the Screen, and our newest partner, Soundstripe. Really excited about Soundstripe. And I'm really grateful to all these folks for helping us keep the lights on. And to you, our listeners, thanks again for joining us. Now go do some inspired work.